Okay, so let's make a start. So what we are looking at doing today is obviously covering learning outcome 5, which is in the unit health and safety management practice. Now, this particular learning outcome that we are looking at talks about, understanding corporate social responsibility. And for the first time, we don't have any indicative content given here is, so we'll be looking at covering, what is corporate social responsibility in the context of health and safety. So when we do talk about CSR, there are lots of different connotations of CSR today, and most organizations, including say PwC and a couple of others, also include in their annual journal report, and there is a focus, on the within the organization to look at implementing corporate social responsibility, which is basically, I would say, things which they want to look at. Um, from a point of view of companies show voluntary companies commitment towards saving the environment, or for social causes and concerns. So what we are looking at is, obviously, it's a very vast field. Corporate social responsibility, if I look at a grocery retailer, could be in the case, they will be looking at, for example, saving the environment, water conservation, looking at usage of less electricity, or being self-sufficient. There could be lots of different types of responsibilities depending on the business and the sector in which the business operates, whether it's primary, secondary, or tertiary sector. So businesses which typically, or organizations which typically operate and use natural resources, their aim would be to look at conserving natural environmental resources so that they're available for future generations. If we look at a secondary business, they will be more looking at waste management, and obviously ensuring that less and less material goes to landfill because they're processing natural resources to produce goods and services. And when we look at tertiary sector, that is where the businesses or organizations which essentially sell services produced by the secondary sector, they would be looking at, ethical reasons of how they do business. And that is where Bill Elkington's, triple bottom line concept comes in: planet, space, plant, and, the 3P concept, which basically talks about the triple bottom line. So their aim would be to look at, making ethical profits from the operations of the business, making sure they are taking care of their own employees, staff, people, and also the community. And last but not the least, the P for planet, which is primarily looking at ensuring that whatever activities they do in terms of generating business, they would be, looking at not harming the environment or the general environment in which they essentially operate. And then the company is always looking at giving back to the society in terms of ensuring that they are their operations are such that they are sustainable and they are adding value to the community or the area or the country or the space wherein they operate. So the main point here is that we have to look at understanding corporate social responsibility in the context of occupational safety, health and safety. So here we are looking at how does the organization look at integrating health and safety standards from a point of view of ensuring that they are, looking at integrating social and environmental concerns into their business operations, thereby prioritizing, the health and safety of employees. And in doing so, what they would look at is create or take proactive measures, essentially to ensure that there are safer working conditions, and all the other parts of the processes and policies that we are discussing, things like quality policies, things like health and safety policies, risk assessment matrices, audits, inspections. All those are done in order to ensure that the workers, if I use a generic term, staff, employees, contractors, as workers, are feeling safe and they work in safe working conditions, their well-being is protected, and you are looking at making employees a key part of the organization in which they also share the broader social responsibility. Now, we'll be looking at discussing two specific, assessment criteria. One is looking into the importance of why CSR objective is important and why is it, closely linked to health and safety within the organization. The second would be to look at outlining the ethical codes of conduct which can be applied to health and safety management. So here, the key parts that we have to look at is what is CSR, what is the link of CSR with health and safety, what are the importance of carrying health and safety, objectives and merging them, or having an overview in terms of merging them with the CSR responsibility of the organization. And last but not the least, what are the basic codes of conduct from an ethical point of view that need to be looked into to making sure that although the company is following policies and processes, but they would want to ensure that any policies and process that they implement, they follow, they create is not actually harming the environment or the society in general. And that is where the ethical code of conducts would come in. So these two assessment criteria are what we are looking at today in this learning outcome. And what I'm going to do is obviously look at a few slides that I've got for this particular session. And those slides is what I would share with you. Now, because corporate social responsibility is a very vast subject, we want to restrict our discussions. We don't want to do a discussion on CSR. We want to do a discussion on what is the context and relevance of CSR in relation to health and safety management. That is what we want to look at. So just as a key terminology, I've covered here, things related to what is corporate social responsibility, a typical definition, which basically says that, this is at some stage when companies do start to use resources which are from the environment and are looking at giving back to the society, they would essentially be looking at considering this under the banner or the umbrella of corporate social responsibility. That means a company's operations might have certain impact towards the environment and in general towards the society. So what is it the organization is giving back to the society, the community, or the area in which it works, employs the individuals or staff or other contractors, and how does it safeguard and ensure that any steps that it takes or any operations that it carries out are safer, are going to be safe for the environment, and in general safer from a point of view of ethical standards. That means too much of profit, not looking at too much of profit. When we look at oil companies in particular, they have this as a main responsibility that there are lots of disasters which have happened. There was a Nigeria, disaster, shell disaster in the early 2000s, wherein the basin was, the leakage of oil in through the basin corrupted the water table and obviously led to the destruction of the flora and fauna in that area. And obviously, as a result of years of fighting and court battles, Shell was then tasked with the aspect of paying back and repatriating local communities and cleaning up the land where these oil spills happen. So that is where sometimes we will look at the aspect of corporate social responsibility, wherein companies are liable under the court of law to be able to ensure that they protect the environment and the community and the locals to which they are, in the area in which they are operating and, obviously doing certain activities. Mining companies would look at mining, oil companies will look at drilling oil. There would be other service companies or other associated companies which will be looking at, carrying out operations, and their aim is to ethically look at ensuring that any sort of operations that they carry out in that area tend to be social, integrated with the community. That means employment opportunities are provided, and in some cases, these operations, are done or carried out in such a way that it doesn't damage the environment. Now, what are the ethical codes of conduct for health and safety? The ethical code of conducts are basically the principles which help the companies prioritize what would be the safety guidelines, bare minimum safety guidelines that they will need to carry out or observe when they are carrying out these operations, so that people are not put in harm's way. There are any, for example, standards or compliance which need to be followed, they will uphold those. And what they will do is put the well-being of their workers working in that location on the on the forefront to ensure that they will not compromise on any sort of safety standards, which would then compromise the safety of the employees or individuals working in that location. Now, if we have to put both of them together, what is CSR and what is the ethical codes of conduct, and then link it to health and safety management, what we are looking at is the key part, that companies' voluntary commitment to integrating social and environmental concerns into its business operations, whereby they prioritize health and safety of its employees by ensuring that they provide safe working conditions. They look at the culture of prevention of any sort of risks. They make sure and ensure that they take proactive measures to protect the well-being or the safety of the worker, and they comply with the legal requirements which are set in terms of health and safety standards in a particular location. And that is what would be CSR in context, of health and safety. Now, in order to understand this in a bit more detail, we can expand and look at a particular video which has been created by IOSH. And this is a video which I was looking at, which basically talks about, how can the workplace safety become unsustainable if there are practices which the organization follows, and or there are signs which the organization does not pick up, which can lead to worker fatalities and injuries. And there is where a global cost, of these work-related injuries, deaths which can happen because of near misses, incidents, or accidents are taken into account, and they are essential part of the health and safety standards or practices which the organization follows as far as relation to CSR is concerned. Now, IOSH is a body, or under research, that has been calculated that there are costs to the tune of $3 trillion which are incurred by companies combined globally. And this cost essentially tends to be because of accidents or incidents which have happened and fatalities which have happened at the place of work. And the cost of remuneration, compensation, along with putting these measures back into place, costs the businesses annually about $3 trillion if the health and safety management standards are overlooked, or proper procedures and plans are not followed. Now, what we also look at is that in this particular video, which is a video of about half an hour, if you watch this particular video, it will tell you and take up examples of how sustainable business practices are being driven by governments, by large organizations specifically, which are required to drive, health and safety standards, especially within value and supply chain organizations. When you look at organizations like DHL, UPS, or organizations which are involved in shipping and freight business, they are a key part of the global supply value chain. And in such cases, there is where the health and safety standards need to be implemented quite stringently. And if these are not implemented, then what it can lead to is pressures on business wherein losses can mount up or claims can rack up. And if fatalities happen and people face injuries and fatalities, then this can become a bigger cost to the business if these standards are not followed. And this particular session, which is conducted by two people, essentially looks at how the progressive let's say, implementation of occupational health and safety standards and management can lead to improved morale, productivity, and loyalty, within the organization, which is obviously healthy for the organization because it helps the organization, let's say, cover or get a healthy return on investment of what they are investing in terms of sustainable practices within the organization. A sustainable practice would be, say, for example, we are at a large premises. If you look at lighting within the building, over the years, what has happened is that the landlord has implemented, sustainable lighting. That means because there are huge corridors and obviously offices and common areas, in such cases, LED lighting has been put, and this lighting dims down if there is no activity or no movement within that area. So it is sensor lighting. It is lighting related to equipment which the company has invested in, decide to invest in. And this smart lighting, as they call it, basically wakes up in any premises when there is movement, or when there is movement of personnel or people within the building. And this allows the building to become, or the building or the premises to actually save a lot of heating bill, electricity bill. And that is because they've looked at the agenda wherein they've included corporate social responsibility in tandem with the health and safety, practices or methods within the premises. A simple example, if they were looking at implementing this energy efficient lighting, but if the lighting does not come up when there is movement in the building or employees feel that it's dark and it's unsafe, then in such cases, it would have failed its purpose under sustainability. But because they have implemented such lighting wherein the sensors, motion sensors are able to pick it up, and they are able to pick movements of people up within the buildings or the corridors or the spaces, that allows corporate social responsibility to be bolt on to the health and safety, methods or policies which have been employed to keep safe employees or workers within the building safe within the premises. So it's a good video, which is a discussion between the president of IOSH, which is Stuart Hughes, and a thought leader or a person who's basically asking a lot of questions to him related to what is occupational health and safety and how is it that the concept of occupational health and safety marries into corporate social responsibility for an organization. So it's an interview. It's like a bit of a debate which needs to be watched, and it will give you some idea in terms of why the two concepts of occupational health and safety and corporate social responsibility can be merged at the management level to ensure that this allows the organization to be compliant with not just the health and safety standards, but also help the organization cover its responsibility on the on the corporate social responsibility side, which is looking at sustainability, which is looking at returning back to the community, or in general ensuring that they are helping to preserve the environment or the natural resources which are being utilized in generating some of these services. So that's the bit that we want to understand with regards to the overarching message behind the learning outcome. Any questions on this so far?
Well, actually, it's good, but I just couldn't relate the link between the example that you just mentioned about the lightning and the how does corporate responsibility help reduce the cost, the expenses.
Sure. So in such cases, when you look at, I think considering that in countries specifically, here where I would give you an example, which are considered to be countries wherein the climate and it's 8-9 months in the year wherein obviously there is the climate is cold, and obviously a significant amount of bill or money spent in terms of heating up the premises in general. A lot of companies in their premises implement, try and implement at least, let's put it this way, methodology. They follow a process or a methodology in order to ensure that they are able to save on certain financial costs. And these financial costs could be, costs which are related to lighting within premises, heating within the premises, and in general, ensuring safety within the premises. So in such cases, what you will generally see is that, in the newer premises or premises which are being refurbished, offices which are being refurbished, there is use of technology now happening, which allows, the equipment to be used in such a way that it helps not just in the conservation of, say, light and electricity and heating, which is to look at effective buildings wherein insulation within the buildings is done. It's done in a modern way wherein it helps conserve, the escaping of heat from the premises. But more generally, it is to do with the fact that, if you recall, for example, a visual of how the employees work within IBM as an organization in the US. There are huge buildings. They work in basically silos, and obviously each desk has a PC or some sort of an equipment. Now, there was one way of obviously asking employees to subtly say that, could you switch off PCs or lighting when you leave the office? But if there are 2,000 people on a floor or 200 people sitting on a particular floor, you can put up posters and do announcements or put up notices that, last person leaving, or people when they are leaving, they may need to ensure that they put the PC to sleep, or their equipment which is not used should be switched off. Now, over a point in time, when these renovation and other things have been done within the premises, the concept of CSR has been brought in, which is to say that we want to conserve electricity. We want to look at saving, electricity and everything. So in such cases, the renovation of the buildings has been done in such a way that, one, the company has installed what is called visual equipments. Second, they've used energy efficient lighting, which is LED. Third, they've used technology, which is the use of motion sensors to ensure that if there are areas of building which are not used, or if there are areas of building in which human presence is not there, then the lighting automatically dims. And this helps in conservation of electricity and obviously financially the company is gaining, because at the end of the day, they would have a less outgoing in terms of the lighting bill for that premises or for that particular section of the premises within the office. So here, it's all about using technology and deploying it in such a way that it helps not just the company gain financially or save cost in the long run, but also makes the building and the premises more environmentally friendly, working towards ensuring that they are using less and less of natural resources, and that would be, obviously the aspect of corporate social responsibility coming in.
Okay, so
Now, yeah, go on.
I mean, like, this has, like, what you have mentioned, I'm familiar with it, but I think this is all related to the environment. I don't see how this is related to the community, the nearby community. So
when we look at the triple bottom line concept, there are three P's: planet, people, and obviously profits. So, and if you look at the concept of, how this is related to health and safety, is that the installation of the equipment is done in such a way that it, responds to the presence of human, or, for example, ensures that the premises become adequately lighted as in a time wherein, if human presence is there, if you're walking within the premises, it should not be that you have to switch on the lights, or lights take a couple of minutes to switch on, and by the time you would have had a slip, trip, or fall. So the efficient utilization and deployment of technology, it is done in such a way that, for example, when you have sensor lights, these sensor lights come on instantly or in a second or two. They should not be delayed sensor lighting, and those could be things which sometimes, the management has to consider when they look at resources point of view, to ensure that what part of it where they can save costs, but at least they're bringing in technology and resources which are going to be useful for a number of years going forward, rather than becoming, obsolete in the short run. In such cases, you would see that they would need to follow certain compliance and related standards for health and safety. Now, you cannot install any form of lighting. This form of lighting in such location in countries like the UK and Western Europe tends to be ambient lighting. That needs to be of a certain wattage. It cannot be below that. And that would mean if those standards are not followed, so for example, if 60 watts is prescribed and you're installing 40-watt lighting, that would be not complying with the standard. And in such cases, you could be liable to, or the premises could be liable to get fines because they're not meeting the set requirements of health and safety standards. So when you are deploying such new technology, you have to follow some relevant guidelines which have been given. And these relevant guidelines typically tend to be defined by the health and safety executive. And that would mean that you need to follow these guidelines to ensure, yes, you are implementing corporate social responsibility, but you cannot be seen to be compromising health and safety standards within a premise. So no objections to, looking at installing new lighting within the premises, but that needs to meet a particular standard. Now, if it helps you save electricity, if it helps you save, gas and heating over a point in time, so be it. But those two objectives go hand in hand. Health and safety cannot be compromised because of CSR, and what companies are trying to do is follow the CSR guidelines to, ensure that they are also following the standards for health and safety required as a bare minimum to implement such things within the premises. This is one such example. You could look at other examples in other premises, other locations like airports, huge buildings, or even in production facilities or engineering facilities, wherein you would generally see that this is something which would need to be followed, as a very minimum basic before it helps you do any other positives. So I might do something bare minimum to meet the requirement, and in doing so, I would also look at getting other benefits, but that is secondary. Health and safety would be the main aspect, in terms of working here. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Apart from that, let me try and see if I can pull out another example from okay, let's look at another example. And this is what we'll discuss probably in the first assessment criteria. Now, when we look at if there are 200 employees, assuming I've just plucked out a number from the air, if there are 200 employees working on a particular floor, and all of them have PCs or laptops, screen equipment. Now, in such cases, you would be looking at ensuring that the users who are using the screen for over, say, 6 hours, 7 hours a day, the company is actually following certain compliance or guidelines when related to health and safety. Now, this health and safety guideline in relation to screens could be display screen equipment. That means in the UK, for example, there are display screen regulations of 1992, which basically say that the employer may need to protect employees from any risks that they feel could be associated with the display screen equipment, which is computers, laptops, or any other sort of display screens. Now, the regulation ensures that workers, if they're using this equipment for a significant amount of time in terms of their daily, I would say monthly work, or because they're using this equipment for continuous periods of hours, then in such cases, these workers might be required to look at the health and safety guideline, for the company would say that you would be required to look at certain guidelines which these workers should be able to meet. That means you would need to look at doing some analysis or findings about the workstations which are being used. What kind of controls are in place if there is something which is to happen, like if it breaks down, if a fire comes out, or for example, have the workers been adequately trained and information being provided to them to operate the equipment. And you have to look at the most important bit, which is the eye and eyesight tests. Tests could be carried out on request of the employees because they use this equipment for a number of hours. Now, if they use it for a number of hours, you would generally see that there is a protective equipment which is provided by the employer, and in such cases, this equipment essentially helps the worker, I would say, workers' eyesight to be, protected. Now, we clearly know of examples when you look at engineering or welders, when they look at doing welding, they wear a screen equipment, and that is primarily a health and safety part of it, because if they look at the laser or the torch and the light, for a number of minutes while they're welding or doing other activities, then it can lead to headaches and obviously, temporary blinding to the eye because it's excessive exposure to light, bright light, which obviously can be harmful to the eyesight of the individual. So in such cases, health and safety equipment has to be provided, and the inspection of such premises need to be done so that it is safe for the workers to be able to operate that equipment. Now, it also poses health and safety risks because there is a lead-based material that they use, and when they use that lead-based material to fuse, the torch is switched on to fuse for welding. It also emits, poisonous gases. So sometimes you would see there are face masks that they wear, and that is again a part of health and safety equipment which has to be employed in such, operations or premises. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now,
So for me, like the first thing that comes to my mind whenever I read about CSR is, for example, I would hire someone who lives nearby the organization so that they can get that. This is the first thing that comes to my mind. So yeah, I'm yeah, this is that's the first thing that comes to mind.
that's fine. So basically, in such cases, what will need to be looked at as a health and safety manager would be that first and foremost, my responsibility that I have is to maintain, I would say, things related to health and safety, which is my first job. The second bit that I will look at is while carrying out these operations or these procedures or following the policies, is there a way that I can also help look at maintaining some of the other aspects of what the organization believes in, which is social responsibility, which why the reason corporate is because we are talking about businesses and organizations which are working and producing goods and services to make profit. That's why the word corporate. But the idea is we are looking at businesses also being socially responsible to the environment, to the community, to the people, to the employees, workers who are also working within that facility. That is what you would look at as a key aspect. So when we do talk about, say, the importance of CSR objectives, which is what the first, learning outcome talks about, that is where what we are looking at is how can we align some of the health and safety, standards with the objectives of what the company follows through broadly on corporate social responsibility. So things like better productivity and reduced absenteeism or overall improved performance would be things that the organization would see because they are doing a good balance between implementing health and safety measures vis-a-vis, asking employees to follow what are called corporate social responsibility activities which the organization believes in. So here, what I would do is, if I were to look at putting in a bit of a summary table to say, okay, how do I relate both of these, from a point of view of together on one scale? What I'm going to be looking at is talking about the key aspects of how CSR actually can be maintained or followed. CSR activities can be followed in tandem. That means side by side while maintaining health and safety regulations within the organization. So for me, when I look at enhancing employee well-being, give you a simple example. If a company decides that they want to have a gym facility being available to employees or staff within the organization. Now, having a gym facility would also mean that there would have to be a trained gym instructor so that if people who are not aware of the weights or the equipment in terms of how it is to be used, then it can lead to injury or, as some sort of fatal accidents if the equipment is not used properly. If I have people who have not been to gyms before and don't know how to handle the equipment, and they have not been given any particular training on how to do that or supervised training, I would say for a certain amount of time, then in such cases it could be fatal or it could be dangerous for the staff to be alone to carry out certain activities in the gym. So in such cases, maybe the company is thinking that, okay, if I become more welfare driven for employees, if I become more, let's say, provide more opportunities and perks to my employees by offering a gym facility that you would enjoy within the premises, that is fine. That is looking at the organizational perspective of giving something back to the employees from a point of view of responsibility. But in doing so, what they will need to ensure is that they do not cut corners. They ensure that there's a trainer or somebody who's available within the facilities to be able to supervise staff when they are using the gym facilities. So that is where health and safety would also become or come into play, because the organization doesn't want the gym to injure people or have incidents wherein they have injuries, but it is seen as a methodology wherein the company would be looking at providing these facilities because they want to create a unique talking point. They might want to say, okay, there are a number of employees who work late hours, and that would allow them to remain both physically and mentally fresh. And that would be the social responsibility or aspect part of it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And we have got a number of other points that we can look at for legal and ethical compliance. Now, what you would generally see is that ISO, when you talk about health and safety standards, and you talk about the International Standards Organization, and what are the standards that relate to, occupational health and safety within the ISO. Now, ISO initially started off as an organization in the early 50s when they used to be standards for engineering or production organizations. But over the years, what has happened is as their portfolio has expanded, as the sectors have expanded, ISO has also increased its operations and they have created codes, standards, compliances, and benchmarks in other facets of the working of the organization. Now, the International Standard Organization also has what is called the Occupational Health and Safety Standards, and they are covered under what is called the ISO 45001. Have you heard about them?
45,001.
45,001, yeah.
Yes, sure. This is the health and safety
So
standard. Yeah.
these are the health and safety standards which the ISO prescribes when we talk about the actual field of health and safety. So these standards include standards which focus on risk reduction. They include standards which allow companies to continuously improve on the facilities or the health and safety policies. And last but not the least, these standards also focus on the compliance and legislation which the company needs to adhere to within a particular country or a geography. So the International Standards Organization has created standards which pertain to occupational health and safety, and having this certification or as an add-on certification within the organization to say that we are an ISO certified company is fine, but we have ISO certification, but we are also compliant with the 45001 certification of the ISO standards, which would go to show that there have been occupational health and safety standards and procedures implemented within the organization, and the organization is bound to be compliant with those standards, which means they have reduced uh, risks of what do you call injury. They are continuously implementing standards for improving health and safety standards for both the organization and the workers or people working in, and they are compliant with the regulations or changing regulations which are being introduced in this particular field. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Now, the second criteria talks about the ethical codes of conduct, which can essentially be applied to, safety, health and safety management within the organization. Now, here, what we are looking at is, talking about what first and foremost is what is the ethical code of conduct? What is it that we want to talk about when we say the ethical code of conduct for health and safety? We don't want to look at ethical code of conduct for lawyers or, for courts and, for other premises. We want to look at what is the ethical code of conduct which can be applied to health and safety management. Now, when we talk about this, we generally mean principles that will help us in prioritizing health and safety of individuals working within the organization. Now, that would mean the organizations would need to act, honestly and with integrity, and then ensure what is called professional competence of the from a point of view of the organization when they employ people within these roles to ensure that they are able to create premises which are health and safety compliant. They are advocating safety improvements, and they are also upholding confidentiality of certain employees if there were incidents or sensitive information or any sort of such incidents which have happened in the past. So what they want to do is using the ethical code, really we want to put the workers or people working within the organization in terms of their well-being and safety in the forefront. Now, what does this jargon for me mean? This means that when I look at the health and safety ethical code, one is that we look at following the code from a point of view of ensuring that the policies and practices are fully implemented within the organization. Now, an example that I would give here is a lot of organizations have a health and safety policy, but how many employees have actually read that policy? How many employees actually comply with that policy? And how many times does the organization in the year or in a particular time duration look at doing an audit of that policy and its practices within the premises of the organization? Now, this all relates to the aspect that is there an ethical code of looking at maintaining this within the organization? That means, is the management committed to maintaining this within the organization? Now, if there is no leadership, and if there is no, I'll put it this way, reason for the leadership to follow compliance and implement these, and there is no employee engagement, and to a certain extent, this would mean that there is no ethics or some sort of a viable ethical code within the organization to maintain health and safety practices and policies while they carry out their work on a, say, for example, day-to-day basis. So essentially here, the main idea of ours from our side, when we talk about ethical codes of health and safety, is that we are looking at primarily focusing on the context of ensuring that the health and safety of the individual is not compromised, whether it's one, 10, or hundreds or thousands of individuals working within the organization under similar premise. And when we do look at the context of CSR, what we are looking at is that the occupational safety and health management standards are implemented within the organization to help in the overall management of the organization. That means in order to particularly improve the risks or mitigate the risks, the organization has implemented all such measures which are required for the organization to, function and not have any sort of, let's put it this way, areas unchecked, which can lead to incidents, accidents, near misses with the employees within the organization. So when we do talk about, this particular bit, which is related to um, the ethical code of conduct, what we are looking at is talking about safety in workplace. We're looking at talking about compliance with the say, for example, the legislation or regulation within the organization, and we are looking at making sure that we are able to essentially, train and develop our employees to follow these principles which have been set in order to keep themselves safe as well as other colleagues and individuals safe within the organization. So the code, when we talk about ethical code, do you know what is ethical code? Just what do you
Like
mean by ethics?
by maybe some actions that you shouldn't be doing so that you maintain this kind of good relationship with everyone and not to insult or to hurt the feelings of someone. So,
Yeah, so your ballpark is pretty much you're in the ballpark. So when we do talk about ethics, what we are looking at is a set of principles, and these principles actually act as guidelines for people to be able to show, use those guidelines to be able to show professional, I would say code of ethic. That means they look at behaving professionally, and this setting which allows them to behave professionally and respond to, say, for example, actions of other people is basically the set of standards that you need to follow when you talk about ethics. Now, when we do talk about ethics and when we do talk about, the ethical codes related to health and safety management, again, we could draw a bit of a summary table, and that summary table would essentially, help us in understanding what are these ethical standards or principles. Now, we can obviously relate them to various points, but three or four things that we would have to relate them to would be, because as you know, we are discussing corporate social responsibility. So one, we will relate them to sustainability, right? An example of this I would give you when you talk about sustainability is that, okay, um, as we know that, when companies look at upgrading IT, there's a lot of IT equipment and other bits and pieces which essentially needs to be changed. So imagine an organization looking at replacing PCs because when Windows 11 came in and we moved from Windows XP to Windows Vista or some other sort of technology, a lot of organizations had to upgrade to the PCs. So when they did the upgrades, one of the things that we can relate to sustainability, apart from health and safety, would be that one, health and safety is that, okay, you're looking at disposal of this equipment in such a way that it does not cause any harm to the environment. So because some of these equipment have materials which can be recycled, so technically what tends to happen is that most of these big companies, when they change IT or equipment within the organization, they basically give it to or have tie-ups with companies would essentially come in and use this IT and recycle some of the components within the IT so that they do not cause harm to the environment. Now, it is a common knowledge and obviously known that when we look at Apple, for example, Apple has done away with the use of three serious chemicals which can actually pollute the water table in a particular geographical area. So when they are not disposed of properly, things like cadmium, mercury, and arsenic can actually poison the water table. So when companies look at following these standards or setting these standards which are required to ensure that they say that they are environmentally conscious and compliant, those are the things which companies would need to do. Now, second, as an aspect, what they tend to do is they look at recycling this material. That means they will basically call professional people who would come in and recycle the equipment. That means they'll take away the equipment, they will format the hard drive, they will do away with all the data so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. And then anything which is reusable, they will extract from there. But if anything which is not reusable, then that equipment would be sent for recycling. And in some cases, some of these equipments are then also sold off to countries in the developing countries in Africa, wherein they do not have access to this, and that allows the company to ensure that they are returning something back to the community, and that comes under corporate social responsibility. But that does not mean that they will sell or refurbish or recycle this equipment, wherein it would shift the danger of some of the let's say usage of that equipment from third world developed countries to third world countries. They will have to ensure that the equipment that they are sending is electrical compliant and compliant with certain minimum regulations which are also applicable in that country. So they would do and implement legal and ethical ways in which they can dispose this equipment. And this equipment, when it is disposed, also then goes if it goes and it gets reutilized or reworked in another place, then they are ensuring that no harmful substances or let's say harm comes to the public who would use it, buy it, or use it for recycling in a particular location. And that would be the code of conduct which the company would need to follow when we look at talking about ethical codes in relation to being applied to health and safety. So they will look at ensuring that the equipment is recycled, but recycled in a way wherein it meets the compliance and standards for a particular location as well. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Any questions?
No, I guess I'm all good.
Right. Okay. For today's learning outcome, what I'm also going to do is, give you some sort of reading that can be done related to, a case study. And this case study that I'm going to pull out is a case study coming from either McKinsey or Deloitte, which is going to be related to, obviously helping you understand this, but the implementation of that happening within a developed country. And the learnings of that you could also look at adopting or implementing in the location that you're in. Okay?
Okay.
Good stuff. So we have the other 3 sessions as scheduled. I believe you received the copy of the schedule.
Schedule of what? Sorry.
So what I'm going to do is obviously the next session we are looking at Saturday, and then one we are looking at Sunday, which will be 5 a.m. So they've been scheduled that way, which will allow us to cover these learning outcomes. And obviously, if you're not able to join, then I will basically be looking at doing the recordings, and those recordings is what I will ensure that you get hold of, from a point of view of reading and listening to.
Okay. Okay. That would be great.
These 2 case studies, which I am going to show you now, are bits that I want you to read through, from a point of view of looking at learning outcome 5. So let me just show you these case studies. Now, one of them is a Hilton hotel case study. This looks at the corporate social responsibility execution of the CSR in relation to health and safety standards within hotels. Right? So this is a 3 or 4 page case study, which basically covers and provides just the findings of it. Most of the points that we have covered, things like ethical responsibility, code of conduct, are basically covered in this particular case study, but relating it to the occupational health and safety standards. The other bit that I would suggest that you have to look at is this case study, which talks about the occupational health and safety and its relation to CSR. Now, this is on the European Agency of Safety for Health and Work, which is maybe an area of interest because you want to learn things within this particular geography. And this particular part, again, relates to how CSR can be used in the context of OHS, occupational health and safety, and how these standards can help the organization improve health and safety management practices within their premises or within their operations. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Good stuff. So I will then catch up with you in the next session. And I am doing a bit of research in terms of the visual display equipment part of it that you mentioned. And I would be able to pull some things across from the JISC library, which are going to be things of importance and related to the units that we are teaching. And I'll upload them on Moodle. I'll drop you an email once that is done. And I think you would find certain aspects of the videos and also the reading material to be quite useful.
Okay, yeah, I find the case studies quite useful as well. So I started with the Bradley or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm reading, finishing up the one that is through HSE.gov website. There's like a couple of case studies at the same page. So I'm looking at that as well. Yeah, so let's see. But yeah, I know like now it's like odd case, but I would I would like also to take my time reading them rather than having like bit of excessive like lectures, you know. But this time is different scenario because I'm going for an audit and um, I don't want to forget whatever I have just taken. So let's see. But I will do my best when I'm in Dubai when I like when I finish with the audit. The rest of the day I will try to maybe to read. But whenever you go to an audit, you sometimes overwhelmed. Sometimes you have to prepare the audit plan. You have to prepare the audit checklist. For the next day, you have to rest, traveling. You know how it goes. So I'll do my best, inshallah, and we'll see how it goes.
Sure. That's great. No worries. And
Okay.
I will help you with that so that the material that you are reading or getting is relevant to the area of your interest with regards to, the bits that you are studying.
Okay. Yes. Yes. That would be helpful. And by the way, on the third week of February, I'm going to travel to London, UK.
All right.
Yeah, it's just for like liaison. So yeah, your office is not in London, right? You're
We
in
we are based in Manchester.
Manchester. It's quite
Yeah.
far from London, huh?
I think from London, if you're coming to London, obviously it's a 2 hour, 15-minute train journey,
Oh,
about 45-minute flight, but it's driving distance wise about 240 miles.
okay. Yeah, I heard that trains are expensive in
Yeah, if you book in advance, probably you'll get a return ticket to within £150, £175, because there are tickets that you can get which are off-peak hours, which means you're not traveling in the peak hours, which are between 5:30 to 9:30 or 10 o'clock. If you're traveling after 10:30 till about 4 o'clock, the tickets are slightly cheaper because they do not constitute, peak hours essentially.
Okay, okay. Okay. That's great. So yeah.
So we'll obviously, if you plan ahead, there is a website called trainline.com, and that website essentially allows you to book tickets or look at fares of different tickets. And if you're planning to come this way, then maybe using that particular, website to
Mm,
book for trains, might be beneficial because it
okay.
will give you a lot of options in terms of tickets and obviously, price points which are available.
Okay, okay. That would be great. And I just have a last question.